All right. Hey there, and welcome to this episode where we're going to talk about navigating stress. And so in the last episode, we talked about the three types of stress. And I want to talk about, how in this episode, how we often, make our stress worse, right? And that's really when we're talking about kind of like the psychological stress that a lot of us, we create our own stress based on just what's going on in here. So obviously there's the challenges of life, right? Which are going to happen. Okay. And those are inevitable, right? I have yet to meet someone who's gone through life without any challenges, and those are stressful, right? Like they create stress, right? That's part of what our body is doing. It's navigating those challenges. And then there's all the stuff that we do in our mind that create even more stress, and in many cases in an unnecessary way. And so that's really what I want to talk about in this episode, because there's going to be events that happen, and then there's all this stuff we do in here that actually like just spirals and makes it worse and actually prolongs the entire experience. In fact, like if you think about it, like what is PTSD, right? We experience a stressful traumatic event, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder, right? And and then our mind is replaying that event, right? Again and again. And now I'm not saying that is something that you're choosing to have happen, but just showing you like, your mind can literally come up with that image of that event that happened, right? Or that stress or that trigger or that, traumatic event, and literally create the stress response again in your body, just like the stress response was going on when the event happened, right? And that's really the power of the mind, and which is like, really incredible. But it also can be very, damaging and very painful for people. So what I want to talk about in this episode is just navigating stress when it comes up, and to make sure that we're not doing things that exacerbate it, right, or make it worse, right? So when we have our stressful events in life, right, that happen, and this can be anything, right? I mean, it could be changing jobs, it could be moving, it could be having children, it could be good things, right? Like getting married, right? It's like, it doesn't necessarily have to be all these bad things, but there's just going to be things that are stressful, okay? We have to make sure that we're doing our part not to let our minds just run wild and create more chaos for us to navigate, right? So, one of the things that we need to do is make sure that we're handling what's happening in front of us now, right? And always coming back to this idea of like, am I okay right now? Right. And so that's like the tip number one that I want to start off is like only handling what's happening right now. Because what happens is with our mind is that, something's happening, and then we create like 3, 4, 5, 18 other things in the future that we have to handle. And because they're not happening right now, it becomes too chaotic for us. Right. So if you're dealing with stress, the number one thing that you need to do is just bring yourself back to now. Right. And ask yourself, okay, like, what's happening right now that I need to handle? And in some cases, the answer might be nothing, right? And if you're ruminating and going, looping about things in the future, it's important to realize that is actually the problem, not what you're looping about, right? So, and making that distinction for yourself is very important, right? And to say like, am I actually creating stress by looping about this, right? Because we often confuse the idea of being busy with being productive, right? And doing something helpful. So when it comes to navigating stress, it's like we want to make sure that we're handling what we need to handle in this moment. And if we're creating more things in our head, it's important that we realize that we're doing that, right? Like, so that's step 2. Like, am I creating something that doesn't exist right now? And if we are, it's important that we reel ourselves back, right? So handling what's happening right now, and then kind of becoming aware, like, oh, is that voice in my mind like just going off about something that's going to happen or may happen or has happened, right? And am I getting lost in that? And if I am, what we need to realize is that when we get lost there, what happens is that we start creating all these problems and this actual stress in our body with something that's not actually happening, right? And that's what I would call an unnecessary, form of suffering, right? Because the reality is we're creating these events that don't actually exist, and then we're stressed about them, right? And And when we're doing that, we're creating that stress, right? We need to take responsibility about that, right? We need to realize that that is something we are actually doing. And because we're engaging with that and we're ruminating about it and we're letting our minds run and we're getting stressed, that's a behavior that we're engaging in. And so recognizing it is the first step to really breaking out of that. And so if I find myself doing that or something like that, and this is a practice, right? You're not going to be perfect about this, but again, this is about navigating your own stress in life. So if you see yourself ruminating in your mind, right? And I have a video on rumination, an episode on rumination that we'll link as well. But if you see yourself ruminating, the first step is to realize that you're doing it, right? Because so often we get so lost in the content of what we're ruminating about that we don't even realize that we're doing it. So once we can start to even note like, oh, I'm ruminating again. Oh, okay. Yeah. And just noticing that, right? And then coming back to the present, that practice right there is so huge for reducing just stress in your life, of realizing to try to see, what am I creating? What kind of stress am I creating in my life? And only coming back to deal with what you're dealing with right now. And the more and more you can do that, right? The more and more you can do that, the more and more you can detach from that voice in your mind. And again, start to just handle what you need to handle today in the present moment. And then whenever the next thing comes up in the future, you're able to be more present for that. Because if you're in the future, what you're not doing is handling what you could handle right now or enjoying right now. Better yet. I mean, how many of us are at the beach with our families or, at dinner with our loved ones, and we're creating these events, right? And not embracing what we have, right? So with navigating stress, those are the two things I want to talk about in this, is just realizing, right? One, like what you need to handle right now. Okay. And if there is anything even, so coming and starting in the present moment. And then secondly, realizing when you're creating something in your mind and when you're fueling that, and then bringing yourself back to the present, right? So that's two tips right there for just navigating stress in our day-to-day life, is just coming back when you notice that you get lost, right? It doesn't matter what you're lost about. It really doesn't. Because if it doesn't exist right now, it doesn't exist, right? If it's something that could happen in the future, it doesn't exist right now. Come back to the present. Okay. And as many times as you need to do that, just keep doing it, right? And it'll get easier and easier and easier. So hopefully you found this episode helpful, and we really appreciate your support by liking and subscribing. And we also have additional resources for you right down in the notes that you can check out with free downloads and meditations, and as well as additional trainings over at restoredminds.com that can help you on this journey. So thank you so much for taking the time to hang out today, and hope you guys have a great week. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you found it helpful, chances are someone else will too, and we'd really appreciate your support by liking and subscribing, and also sharing this video on your social platforms. Also, if you're looking for additional help, we have some resources right down in the links below to help you on your journey. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you soon.